More than once this week, I've been asked what in the world I was going to say on Easter Sunday this year, especially after painting myself last year as a bigger fan of the Jesus of Palm Sunday than the Jesus of Easter. I even had to ask myself that question a few times. With my distaste for the atonement theories preached in some other places this morning, I might be the first to question my readiness for prime Easter time. But here we are. Welcome. And this is one of the most amazing aspects of our tradition. We have inherited symbols and stories and sacred days that can be reinterpreted, but cannot be ignored. And I celebrate this fact. So I've cleaned myself up. I've thrown on a suit. Take a good look before I get macaroni and ham juice all over it. I have tied a bow tie myself. I have tamed my hair a bit. I have lacquered my nails, and I'm ready to dive into this Easter opportunity with all of you. Let's go. So, regarding symbols and stories, I don't exactly know how this myth started, but when I first showed up at Judson about 5 years ago, there was a rumor going around that our beautiful communion table, which you can see hanging out in the corner over there nursing a broken leg, that it had been made using the wood of the cross that used to hang in the front of our meeting room. I remember being astonished by this perfect image. A divisive symbol that has simultaneously freed and oppressed so many for centuries, being dismantled and reshaped into a symbol of community and food and the Jewish roots of Christianity. This myth was a major part of my head over heels fall into love with this building and its traditions. So, with deep regret, I must tell any newcomers or anyone who has internalized this perfect myth that it has been debunked by our in-house Judson Snopes historians. Our feeble communion table was not, in fact, constructed from the pieces of our old cross. I'm very sorry. But on this Easter Sunday, I want to focus on why and how this debunked myth can still create such a beautiful, meaningful, activating message for all of us. To do that, we need to go back to today's ancient testimony. Here, we witness 3 heroines, 2 Marys and 1 Salome, arriving to anoint the decaying body of Jesus, their beloved and crucified Savior and leader. But when they arrive, they find no dead body, but rather a young man. Now, some this morning will say that this was an angel, but Mark's text says a young man who tells them that Jesus has been raised and that they should go and tell the disciples. This part of the story is probably familiar to most of you. But guess what? In Mark's gospel, which most scholars agree was the first gospel to be written during the decades following Jesus' death, this is the final moment of the story. Segments were later added to flesh out this gospel as Christians thought it needed a bit of fluffing up, but I'm going to say it again since it blew my mind the first time I realized it. Mark's gospel didn't originally end with sightings of a resurrected Jesus calming his grieving followers and assuring them that all will be fine. Mark's gospel ends with 3 frightened women who flee the scene and tell no one what they have and haven't seen. Mark's gospel ends in amazement, but that amazement is filled with grief and fear. Now, if it makes you feel better to view Mark's gospel as simply being unfinished, and if it makes you feel better to skip over to the other gospels to find the resurrected Jesus who comforts and confirms our heart's desires for immediate and sustainable salvation, I won't stop you. But there's power in this scene and its abrupt, blunt ending that seems just like real life. with all its unanswered questions, unspoken promises, and uneasy fear. Because something happened between the historical events of Jesus' life and the writing of the Gospel of Mark, and then again between the crafting of Mark's Gospel and the crafting of the other Gospels. Myths continued to be created. Stories continued to swirl and reshape and adjust according to what would be most beautiful, meaningful, and activating for the budding early Jesus movement communities. These communities took the history from decades before and mixed it into narratives that would activate them as they became themselves. So, how do I appreciate Easter when I sometimes have no idea whether I believe any or all of the things said about Jesus in any of these Gospels? Well, I have an answer for myself, and perhaps it will help any of you who, like me, hold in precarious balance both a nagging need to believe in resurrection and a postmodern problem with belief in general. Here's what I believe. Between the spare lines, the gospel stories of Jesus say just as much about the resurrection of a community as they do about Jesus' resurrection. Sure, once you get into Matthew's gospel and Luke's gospel and, of course, John's gospel, the truth claims to literal resurrection take on more shape and verve, but what does it mean? If Mark's gospel, this one that ends with an empty tomb, 3 terrified women, collective silence, no body, and tons of unanswered questions, what if this gospel was the one written closest to the actual life of Jesus? I think it might mean that the possibilities of resurrection need to come from some unexpected places. Now, I don't want to ruin anyone's Easter here, really. The image of resurrection coming on Sunday morning and solving all of the problems of Friday and Saturday in one fell swoop can be comforting, and the image has done much for me over the years. I'm happy if it does the same for you. Heck, even in this hip church, we love the old promises of hymns that tell us the strife is o'er and Christ the Lord is risen today. But in a time and world where easy and fast paths to resurrection seem less and less possible, perhaps we're in need of rethinking resurrection more as a maddeningly slow and negotiated communal task that is in need of continual care and imagination. Life and the justice-making that should fill our lives seems like a continual and repetitious trip through Holy Week. The trick is participating in the action until the end. Now, if you're more of a visual learner, take a look at our bulletin cover. You can pull it out. I view each panel of John Marr's art piece as representing one day of this weekend we all know too well through Mark's gospel eyes. The trauma of Good Friday is found in the cross and nails. The emptiness of Holy Saturday is found in the carved out hole. The mystery of Easter Sunday is found in the floating stone, the rolled away barrier. Trauma, emptiness, mystery. Where's the resurrection? Where's the answer that will draw us out of the mystery of our trauma-fueled emptiness? The 3 women in Mark's gospel didn't get an answer, and rarely do we. The 3 days represented on the bulletin offer pain, fear, and amazing questions. They offer exactly what life offers us, even in our most joyful moments. We can look for easy resurrection and we can find cheap versions of it, and the Christian church has sought cheap paths to resurrection for centuries, but a rush to easy resurrection doesn't dismantle the destructive cross at the root of the trauma. And a dismantling of the cross, just like womanist theologian Karen Baker Fletcher says in our modern testimony, a reshaping of that cross into usable pieces of wood is exactly what was in order during that first Holy Week, and is still exactly what is in order for this year's Holy Week. We see the trauma of Friday, the emptiness of Saturday, and the mystery of Sunday all around us every day. We encounter crosses of our own making and crosses made by others regularly. We seek confirmation of our own mysterious beliefs and suggest that those who seem stuck in their own trauma or emptiness that we can't immediately understand simply try harder, pick themselves up by bolder bootstraps. We often deny the realities of the trauma of Good Friday, that back then there were oppressive systems that Jesus was fighting against, and which led him to the cross, and that oppressive systems have not gone away. This is why I believe myths started to pop up that added to Mark's earlier narrative. The members of the Jesus movement were traumatized, empty, and full of amazing questions. Much like the myths here at Judson, Jesus followers created myths that kept them together, that responded to the trauma of seeing their leader crucified, that began to fill the emptiness following that crucifixion and sought to answer the questions left in the wake of the rolled away stone. But luckily, the Jesus movement didn't simply create and then disseminate myths. Myths don't do anything if they are simply allowed to be myths. Myths can be dangerously paralyzing and violently oppressive. They lie at the root of mass murders and holy wars and isms and phobias of all kinds. Tribes that aren't careful become empires. And the good myths, the constructive myths, only prove their worth as they continue to activate justice-making in the world. So what did the Jesus movement do? Well, they had the trauma, the emptiness, and the mystery covered. But that doesn't include the other day in this week, the Thursday that we commemorate every month at this agape meal. Maundy Thursday wasn't simply the night that Jesus was betrayed. It was the night that Jesus gave his followers a new mandate. Maundy Thursday, Mandate Thursday. Sitting around the Passover table, a table made of wood, the same material on which he would be crucified, Jesus ordered, begged his followers to love one another as he loved them. The mandate was simple, and in the light of Jesus' passionate, awesome actions on Palm Sunday, it distilled justice-making activity down to its essential root. Love, not easily, but actively. This is the sort of complicated simplicity the entire Jesus movement got behind before we started to muck it up along the way, and that's what we human beings do. We muck things up. But if we allow ourselves, we also remember. And remembering isn't passive. It's the root of the Passover Seder and the root of the Jesus movement. There is no way to get rid of trauma or emptiness or mystery. They all revisit us on a regular basis, but after Friday and Saturday and Sunday had passed, the Jesus followers dismantled the cross. They dismembered it, and they reconstructed it. They remembered it as a communion table. They didn't do this literally, just as we haven't done this literally at Judson. But the metaphor happened, and if we're willing, it continues to happen. Crosses can't be denied or destroyed, but they can be dismembered and remembered into communion tables that absorb our pain, our emptiness, our questions about life and death deeply into their makeup. We sing songs of resurrection stories because whether they are true or not, they activate us. But we also sing songs of honesty. You'll hear two of them in a few moments, one completely classical, one completely Dolly Parton, and both existing in the question of how we work toward communal resurrection. In her song, Dolly hasn't seen the day burst forward in all its glory, but she's looking. And she sees a glimmer. The women at the tomb sit in terror and amazement, but they know what their mandate is. It's to remember that last Passover Seder, when Jesus foreshadowed the trauma and emptiness and mystery, but gave the only answer he knew to give, that we must dismantle the cross, dismember it into usable pieces of wood, and reconstruct it into a table where all are welcome to love and to remember. Not easy, active. But these tables aren't just symbols. It would be so easy if they were. These tables hold within them the memory and reality of trauma, emptiness, mystery, and hope. These tables don't deny. They reimagine. They resurrect. They welcome both the wonders and dangers of solitude and of community. They hold within them the knowledge that will keep them from idolizing ourselves and our empires. They reshape us into a continuing revolution against the crosses we construct. So, is our communion table here at Judson made from an old cross? Yes. No. Yes. We'll only find out if we use it. So, as is our custom on every Agape Sunday here at Judson, let's spend a little time now sharing our own stories. Dolly Parton and our communion moment will come in just a bit, but take this time to gather up some food and drink, welcome the folks who aren't able to sit at the table, and take a few moments and find out who's sitting around you. We'll let you know when it's time to sing.